Thank you for joining me. Hope your coffee is as good as mine. We are here for another edition of Sunday Coffee with Texas Paul. It is wonderful to see you. I want to start the day with a little bit of good news, a little bit of healing. See, when we're dealing with racism and we're moving beyond it, a lot of racists are really scared of what that's going to look like. They're really afraid that they're going to be treated as shitty as they've been treating everybody else. And I'm here to show you what it actually looks like. This is a wonderful event. It happened this Friday. This was at the White House, President Biden awarding the Medal of Honor to Colonel Paris Davis for his actions during the Vietnam conflict. And you have to kind of be scratching your head a little bit about a Medal of Honor being awarded to somebody from Vietnam at this late a date. Well, Colonel Davis was recommended for the Medal of Honor, and the paperwork disappeared. And it was resubmitted, and the paperwork disappeared again. And it was widely accepted that it was due to the fact that Colonel Paris Davis is black. And somebody didn't want this black man to get the Medal of Honor. Well, we've rectified that. Have we made it right? No. I don't know how many apologies that would take, but you know, this man was awarded the Medal of Honor for a kind of bravery that they make movies out of. And this is what healing looks like. We get to celebrate this man, one of us. In Vietnam, he was captain at the time. He was deployed with a group of the South Vietnamese soldiers, and they came under heavy enemy fire. His gallantry does not begin to describe his actions that day. It was an inexperienced company of South Vietnamese soldiers. They were terrified. They scattered. He led by example. He called them back together. They repelled the enemy attack. There were several waves. He ended up calling artillery in on his own position, within 30 yards of his own position, to repel this attack. Despite being wounded in the leg, he charged across an open field under heavy fire to save a wounded sergeant that couldn't make his way back under his own power. He ran back across the field, and while running up the hill to try to get the sergeant to safety, he was wounded again. And despite having 2 wounds, refused evac himself because he wouldn't leave his men in the fight. The reading about the accounts of what went on are literally like reading the most valorous movie you could imagine. It was Incredible what this man did. And he was denied the honor he deserved over racism. You know, they say in the accounts it was suspected racism, but it was racism. There was no other reason for the Army not to celebrate this man. But now we get to celebrate him. And that's what moving beyond racism looks like. We get to celebrate the bravery of everyone. And it's a gift to us. It's not, you know, people with fear in your gut, you racist bastards, you know, you have this fear that you're just going to be treated as bad as you treated everybody else. Well, you know, no, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. And people aren't shitty as you are. But anyways, I wanted to celebrate that with you this morning. It is always great to talk about an American hero. We have something really good. If you haven't seen it, you're going to really enjoy this. This is a commercial put out by Midas Touch, folks over at Midas Touch Media. It is really fantastic. Let's take a look at it.
In 2020, there were 4.8 thousand pounds of fentanyl seized by CBP.
Let's start over.
By the CBP. That is a direct result of Biden administration. In 2020, there were 4.8 thousand pounds of fentanyl seized by CBP. But in 2021, it increased to 11.2 thousand pounds of fentanyl was seized by the CBP. That is a direct result of Biden administration policies.
President Biden, protecting our border, keeping our country safe. Midas Touch is responsible for the content of this advertising.
That's an amazing ad. And that's what I've been waiting for, is for our side to get in it and do it. The guys at Midas Touch, again, are leading the way. Just a disclaimer, I am a Midas Touch contributor, so this is a point of pride for me to see the work that comes out of this organization. This is something that we've been screaming all along. Sure, you talk about drugs that were seized, but yeah, that's because Biden's doing a great job. And I love that Midas Touch took Marjorie Trader Greene's words and just used them to just, again, truthfully. Just use them truthfully. And folks, you really have to wonder why. Why are they going so nuts about the border? This whole border, we've been listening to it forever, and it's about to get worse again because they've got a bill that they've come up with. It's a mess. You know, for years, not only have we been saying that the Republicans would just get out of the way, we would fix the border, because the Democratic border bill that we've got ready to go, if they would just get out of our way, involves an investment in infrastructure to vet people coming, asylum seekers, whatnot, coming to the border, and an additional technology to help seize more illegal contraband coming across the border. But what do the Republicans want to do? They've never had anything they could really talk about, and then they've come up with Chip Roy. He's one of those gerrymandered wonders. They carved out righties from San Antonio and righties from Southeast Austin and ran it out into the middle of nowhere. His district out in the middle of nowhere, so they could just capture as many right wingers as possible to give Chip Roy a district. He's proposed the Border Safety and Security Act of 2023. And what this act boils down to, you're not going to believe this, folks, is cutting Greg Abbott a check for his Lone Star boondoggle. That's right. They want this bullshit multi-billion-dollar waste of money, this $5-6 billion waste of money that Greg Abbott is engaged in, trying to claim credit for everything that Joe Biden and Customs and Border Patrol has done, doing nothing but parking the guard down at the border who really can't do anything, can't arrest people. We've had over 12 suicides from our own guard members here in Texas, because they're just stuck out in the middle of the desert, ripped out of their lives over this show. And it's nothing but theater. The real work's being done by Customs and Border Patrol. Way to go, Joe. Just like we saw in Midas's commercial. But the Border Safety and Security Act wants to refund, has a provision in it to refund Greg Abbott and us in Texas for wasting that money. No, hell no. No, we people in Texas need to own what we did. We allowed Greg Abbott to be elected. We allowed him to waste that money, and no, the American people don't need to bail us out on that. We need to take a big chunk of that surplus that just popped up due to inflation. If you haven't heard, my state had a $32 billion surplus because of inflation, because we're a sales tax state, which is why you can never let a national sales tax go through, because it incentivizes the government to encourage inflation. They're going to have to take a big chunk of that, and they're going to have to pay those bills. The American people should not ever write us a check for this Lone Star boondoggle. And the other thing that this does is it takes what is, if you're not familiar with Title 42, when COVID hit, they put a law in place that allows us to suspend due process for people trying to come into the country. You can just arrest them and push them back across the border. There's no trial, no hearings, nothing. That was an emergency measure put in place because of COVID, to try to prevent the spread of COVID. It expires on March 11th with the COVID declaration of emergency declaration. So yeah, that's why we're talking about this now. We need to get ahead of this nonsense. We need to get ahead of what is about to happen, because if you think the Republicans have been acting like fools with these stunts of putting migrants on buses and shipping them off, lying to them, telling them they're going, places that they're not, lying to them, telling them they have jobs, going, buses showing up at the vice president's residence. And again, it's racism is why they keep dropping them at the vice president's residence, because logistically, what does that do? What does that do? The vice president has no legislative authority, no administrative authority. That is purely because Kamala Harris is a black woman, and they think that they can get away with attacking a black woman. If they drop these migrants in front of the White House, nobody would stand for it. Nobody would stand for it. But we're about to see a whole flood of that idiocy again, because on March 11th, the COVID emergency declaration ends and Title 42 goes away. You don't need emergency legislation if you don't have an emergency. Moving on. I want to talk a little bit about trans hate in this country. We just had Mike Knowles of the Daily Caller give a speech to a cheering audience calling for the eradication of trans people. I just want to say that again. He called for the eradication of trans people, the elimination of them from our society. Folks, there are 5 to 7 million transgendered people in our country. Yeah, 5 to 7 million people. And I just want to say this to Republicans. That's why you're going to lose. because these are real people. This isn't a game. These are real people that are not, they're not going away. It is a physical state of being to be transgendered. They are real and they are here. And they are not going to just accept you eradicating them from our society, and neither are we. We're not going to accept you and your hate bills and your hate legislation and your attempts to make these people disappear. They deserve to live a life like everyone else. This is America. For as long as we Democrats can keep it America, it's America. We have to put a stop to this, folks. 1.5% of the population is transgendered. Think about that. I mean, you never really, when we have these arguments, they're in the abstract for most of us, because I'm not transgendered and the vast majority of you aren't. 98.5% of you people are not transgendered. So it's really hard to really feel the impact of these hate bills that the Republicans keep putting up. But all you need to do is think that that's 5 to 7 million of my fellow Americans that are right now, as we are sitting here together, talking about the week's events, drinking our coffee, are sitting there sipping coffee alongside of us. There is one thing that I want to talk. I want to skip back to the border for just a minute. There is one thing about, because again, we're about to be deluged with crap from Republicans. March 11th, again, the emergency declaration for COVID expires. Title 42 goes away. They are going to have border diarrhea of the mouth. It is going to happen over and over and over again. The reason they do this, and the reason they utter the same phrases over and over again, is because they're trying to get you to forget something. They're trying to get you to not think about the border when they run things the way they run the border. They want you to think about this fictional narrative about fentanyl. And folks, let me tell you, I have a piece that's coming out of Midas Touch Media where I address fentanyl. It's the new boogeyman. It's the new reefer madness. It's the new silliness. They tell you things like, and I'm sure there are people in our audience, good people in our audience, that believe this, that if you accidentally pick up a dollar bill and it's had fentanyl touching it, oh man, you could die. That's fiction, folks. That has been completely and utterly debunked. You cannot overdose by touching a bill that's had fentanyl powder on it. You can't. You just can't. It's physically impossible. But they run with this fiction constantly, and they create this boogeyman, and they say it over and over and over again. And there's method to their madness. There's a reason they do it. The reason they're doing it is they don't want you to remember what they did when they ran things. They don't want you to remember this bastard, Stephen Miller. And they don't want you to remember what he did. They don't want you to think about what they did. They don't want you to think about taking children and ripping them from their families. They don't want you to think about that. They don't want you to remember that they took children away from their parents, ripped them away from their parents. I'm sorry, that's a tough one. They don't want you to think about that and remember what they are. And they're priming the pump with their own base with this fentanyl boogeyman, should they ever get power again, to be just as horrific as they once were again. So folks, we have to be militant about this. We have to be brutal in the way we defend human rights, because it is a violation of someone's human rights when you are not when you go to a country and ask for asylum, for them to take your child away from you and lose your child, to be completely unable and to find your child and return them to you. It's taken us years to rectify this horrific behavior. This was a crime against humanity. And they don't want you to think about that. That's why they have diarrhea of the mouth when it comes to the border, and they're on their catchphrases and they're constantly talking. But every time you hear Biden's failed border policy, I want you to think about children in cages. I want you to think about every ounce of fentanyl they talk about being seized was seized by Joe Biden and the Customs and Border Patrol agents at our border, the federal agents at our border. But like I said, moving on. The Murdaugh case. Alex Murdaugh, sentenced to consecutive life sentences, 2 consecutive life sentences. That man will die in prison. One of the what I really wanted to talk about that, because that is, for everybody else, yesterday's news. But the judge in that case, Judge Clifton Newman, just lost a son a few months ago. And I just want you to take a moment of humanity for yourself and think about what it must have been like to sit and listen to the testimony in this trial, grieving the loss of your son. Lost his son to cancer. I tell you, folks, for him to sit there and be as fair as he was, to be as impartial as he was, to just be able to endure it, is testimony to the fact that in this country, we still have decent people. And what a stark juxtaposition this is. I mean, put these two men next to each other as you saw them in this trial. You have Alex Murdaugh, who is a microcosm of everything we hate about the right. And I'm not talking about the way the man voted or the way he donated or whatever, because he donated to, he was like Trump. He donated to whoever served his purposes. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about his party affiliation. I'm talking about who he is and how he acts. The amount of privilege and selfishness that this man was. Everything in the world was about him. It allowed him to steal. It allowed him to murder. Compare that to what was going on in that trial, just feet away from him, the sitting judge was grieving the loss of his son. And yet he still took the law seriously. He still forced himself to be impartial, to not be prejudiced. He treated Alex Murdaugh fairly under the law, as any defendant would be, listening to this man's horrific, selfish, disgusting actions. And if that doesn't give you faith in humanity, that in the midst of something this awful and dark, that we can have another human being be unbiased and generous and decent, I don't know what will. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Judge Clifton Newman. We need more people like you. We need people like you in our judiciary, because our judiciary is very challenged right now. It is full of men that cannot be unbiased. They're too jaded by their politics to be unbiased. And I salute you, sir, because to be able to endure that was more than I could have done. And I recognize that. Moving on, let's talk about Zelensky and Ukraine. You know, we had a highly edited video come out. It was just disgusting. A highly edited video come out of Zelensky. And again, you had old Farty Marge talking about it on the floor of Congress and all of the nonsense. And what the video basically said, I'm not going to give it oxygen. I'm not going to show you that video. I'm not going to repeat it. It was a completely fake edited video that made Volodymyr Zelensky appear to say that Americans need to go die in Ukraine. Basically, we need to be on the ground fighting in Ukraine. The man has never said that. He's always said absolutely the opposite, because as Joe Biden has done an amazing job supporting Ukraine and keeping this contained, if we put boots on the ground, if we, people are saying we should help Ukraine have air superiority. The minute an American pilot flies over Ukraine's territory and engages in combat, the entire country of Russia will galvanize against us in support of Putin, in support of this war. As it is now, Russia is collapsing. The last thing we want to do is steel up their spine. And that's why these disgusting traitors are creating these videos. And they're also being created by Russian hackers. There's another video that's being circulated. You're going to see it all over your social media here. It's a fresh one out of the hackers, Russian hackers up in St. Petersburg. It's a deep fake. It's not just an edited video. It's a deep fake that literally creates a fictional Zelensky telling Ukrainian soldiers to lay down their arms, that they've been defeated and they're surrendering. And I assure you, these right-wing GOP traitors will be sharing that video around. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Ukraine is our ally. Russia is our enemy. Russia wants to destroy our country and our standing in the world, and Republicans are more than happy to assist them. They're more than happy to attack their fellow Americans. They're more than happy to destroy our country, which is a fine segue to this next story. By the way, I hope you like my cup, folks. My wife has a hobby. She makes these for me, and I absolutely love this one. I'm keeping this, and I'm not letting her. She'll peel these off and put a new one on there, and I'm not letting her. I'm keeping this cup forever. And if you're woke as fuck like I am, put it in the comments. I'd love to see it. Let's talk about Disney. A lot of people, you hear a lot about it. You hear a lot about DeSantis and attacking Disney. A lot of people don't realize how bad this is, where it comes from, why it's happening. So let's do a deep dive into this. Let's break it down and go back to the beginning. If you don't know, Disneyland in California was built in Anaheim in 1955. Disney World in Florida, they started construction in 1967. They finished in 1971. And a lot of people don't even realize that because a lot of people just assume Disney World was first. It wasn't. Actually, California was first. When they were running the park in California, one of the things they realized is that they weren't getting people coming to the park from east of the Mississippi. All of their customers were from the west of Mississippi, and they didn't want to give up, the majority of the population that lives east of the Mississippi. So they started looking around saying, look, we need to build another park. We need to go after these customers. We need to service these people. So they started looking around, and they settled on Florida. And one of the reasons they settled on Florida was in building the California park, they identified difficulties and problems. They were able to take these problems to the government of Florida and say, look, we have these problems. We want to avoid things like zoning disputes, because, you have these fictional stories about the corrupt politician and the corrupt zoning official that you've got to bribe, and the crazy Karens that are the zoning official's cousins. So, they're willing to die on every mountain to fight what you're doing. These stories came from reality, folks. And Disney had a hell of a time in Anaheim. They had a hell of a time building that park in Anaheim. Every time they wanted to build something, it was either too tall or too loud and it was just one fight after another. And they said, we're not going to do that. So they found land out in the middle of nowhere in Florida, and they made a deal with the Florida government. They said, we get to set up a special district, and it's called the Reedy Creek District, the Reedy Creek Improvement District. And we get to run it. It is essentially a county government unto itself. What your county does is what Reedy Creek Improvement District does. And Disney ran it for the longest. They could do everything a county could do. They could float bonds. They could, they maintain the roads. They maintain the fire responders. They maintained all the emergency responses. They have their own water system that they maintain. No hassles about zoning, no hassles about getting the right to build. It's a Small World, because It's a Small World plays the same song over and over and over and over again, really loudly all day long. It was just the guarantees they needed to make sure that they didn't go through the same problems that they had in Anaheim. And it worked. It worked. I'm not simping for Disney here. I've got no particular love for Disney, but I like to call balls and strikes as balls and strikes. As far as running Reedy Creek Improvement District, it worked. Disney running it worked. And you have to think about this, folks, just as a side note. What have Republicans always stood for? They say, oh, business does things better than government. Business does things better than government. Well, this was one of the rarest unicorns where that was actually true. It eliminated all the corruption bullshit. It eliminated all the corruption bullshit that they had to deal with in Anaheim, and allowed them to just build their business. So fast forward to modern times. Remember, this happened in 1967. This deal was brokered, folks. I mean, I believe it was 1967 that legislation passed, or was maybe 66. It was 67 when they were about to break ground. That was the deal they signed right before they broke ground. And this is 2023. And Ron DeSantis in Florida just tried to take it all back. And he did it in what is just perfect Republican fashion. The stupidest things in the world they did. And I don't mean they talked about, I mean they did. The Florida legislation, at the urging of Ron DeSantis, first passed legislation that dissolved the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Just dissolved it. that legislation passed, it was sent to the governor, and before the governor could sign it, a state employee said, stop what you're doing. If you sign that bill, Reedy Creek Improvement District, which is a massive economy onto its own, so $1 billion sounds like a lot of money, but to Disney, it's not. The Reedy Creek Improvement District had $1 billion in bonds floated out. And if you dissolve it, those bonds come due immediately. And guess who doesn't have to pay those bonds? Disney. They were being dumped on the people of Florida. And believe me, $1 billion coming out of your budget immediately for a state, even the state the size of Florida or Texas or New York or California, makes a difference, folks. That is a lot of money to just dump on your people and have them have to just cough it up. And that's exactly what would have happened if this legislation had been signed by Ron DeSantis. So they stopped that, thanks to somebody from the comptroller's office saying, screaming bloody murder, stop. So they rewrote the legislation. And what they did was rename the Reedy Creek Improvement District to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. Boy, that rolls off the tongue. The Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, they renamed it, and they gave the governor the right to appoint members of that board, which seems to be a big theme for them. These people that always want to talk about, the parents being in charge and the people being able to run things and getting government out of everything. Florida has had this habit of giving all the power to Ron DeSantis and the governor. So instead of, electing board members or, letting the people decide who's on the board of the Central Florida Tourism District, they gave the power to the governor. And keep in mind, he's a Republican, which means you can't run anything. Republicans are not a governing party. They never have been. Look at every state that Republicans run. Look at Texas. It's a freaking disaster here. We can't even keep the power running. Every freaking winter we lose power, and the governor will do nothing about it. Our property taxes are going through the roof. Florida insurance prices are going through the roof. They never rebuilt after Ian. They relied wholly on the federal government to rebuild after Ian. On the state end of it, all they had was that stupid volunteer organization for their emergency response. And it was a disaster. Every time Republicans run a state, it's a disaster. It ends up being a financial mess for the people that live there. Republicans can't govern. They used to be an opposition party, which meant that they were a brake on Democrats. They kept us from going too far, which is a good thing. I don't want fascist control of our government by us liberal Democrats. I don't. I like a two-party system. I like opposition, but Republicans aren't it. They aren't it. They are a party that is wholly there to get in our pockets and take money to their donors. They're a party that is there for culture wars to press the most extreme idiotic policies, which brings us back to Disney. What set this fire off? What set the Florida legislature into motion was they had passed a law called the Don't Say Gay Bill. It's commonly known as the Don't Say Gay Bill. And in the middle of a teacher crisis, what this bill did, mind you, every state in the country is trying to recruit teachers. Everyone has a teacher shortage. We do not have enough teachers. This bill attacked teachers. If you were a gay teacher and a student asked you in the state of Florida, if you had a picture of you and your husband or you and your wife, if you were a lesbian, you couldn't answer a question. And if you did, the parents of that kid, and that's what the purpose of this bill was. It wasn't to protect children, because think about it. It was for K through third grade. Sexuality doesn't really play a part. Do you remember being that young? I can remember my third grade teacher. Hi, Miss Keller. We called her Killer Keller. Can you remember the third grade? I can remember back that far. Sexuality wasn't a thing. This isn't protecting the kids. What this was opening up an avenue for churches and their lawyers and the most radical elements to sue, to tap into the taxpayer's pocket. Because that was the biggest thing that this bill did, was it allowed Karens to hire lawyers and sue their school districts if a kid happened to ask a question about, why does little Timmy like to kiss the boys? The teacher can't say, well, some little boys are like that. Oh, sued. And the teacher gets written up and eventually fired. That's the climate they created with this radical bill that came out of a religious nutball. Well, I'm going to tell you about in a minute. In a time when they have a teacher crisis, and Florida is worse off than most states. They have a severe teacher crisis. This is the environment that they created to pander to the most radical among us. Well, Disney, who has extremely loyal employees. Disney employees are incredibly loyal, more so than most companies. They are Disney. You talk to a Disney employee, they are Disney. Many of them are fabulous. Many of them are gay. Many of them are lesbian. Many of their performers, actors are gay. And in loyalty back to their loyal employees, Disney said, we cannot endorse this don't say gay thing. We have gay employees, and we're not going to do that. That was it. That was their entire statement. They didn't tell anybody what to do. They just said Disney's not on board with this. And you have to understand, Disney is Florida's largest single employer. This was huge for the people that worked at Disney. Even if you weren't gay, this was the company standing up and saying, no, we support our employees. The radicals freaked out. Absolutely freaked out, because Disney has huge sway in Florida. It does. It has huge. They have huge sway in Florida. So, in an act of vengeance to try to kowtow Disney, all of the events we were just discussing took place. Florida tried to shoot itself in the face by dissolving Disney's Reedy Creek Improvement District and dumping $1 billion worth of bonds instantly on Florida taxpayers. And then the second thing they did was essentially the same exact thing. Because for a moment, I want you to look at this from Disney's point of view. The Central Florida Tourism and Oversight District that's now taken over. Why would Disney care about those bonds anymore? They don't have to pay them. Why would they? they don't run that district anymore. If that district fails, Disney still has the money to maintain its parks. They just do. It's all of the state's responsibilities that get screwed. And what did DeSantis do? Did he appoint engineers to maintain roads and the water district? Did he appoint, people familiar with emergency services? I mean, Disney has some very unique situations. I mean, you've got to know, if you are the fire department at Disney, you've got to know how to rescue people from a really frickin' tall roller coaster. That's something they practice. Well, now the state runs that. The state's responsible for that. And did he put people that know how to engage in emergency rescues on the board? No. Why? Because he's a Republican. They're not actually thinking about governing. They're not actually thinking about making this district work. No, he pandered. He put donors, big time donors. He put Bridget Ziegler on the board. There are 5 members of this board. He appointed Bridget Ziegler. Her husband is the Florida GOP chairman. So tell me that's not going to be partisan as hell. Her husband is Christian Ziegler. And Bridget Ziegler drafted the Don't Say Gay bill. So yeah, this isn't going to be unpartisan. This is going to be extremely partisan. One of the things that Republicans always scream about is the partisan government. You're canceling us. What did they do when they had the chance? Did they appoint people to do a good job like we Democrats would do? No. They appointed Bridget Ziegler, the person that drafted the bill that caused this mess in the first place. And her husband, who is the radical freak that is responsible for all these culture wars in Florida, Christian Ziegler, they're hand in hand going to have that seat on the board. Martin Garcia, is this guy an engineer, or does he have any particular knowledge to run this? No. What's his qualifications? He donated $50K to Friends of Ron DeSantis PAC. Yeah, he's an attorney who donated to Ron DeSantis. That's his qualifications. He's an ultra loyalist. Does Ron DeSantis have any ability to run this district or be involved in this business? No. So why would any of his loyalists? You got Mike Sasso. This one's great. I mean, just Federalist Society lawyer. Federalist Society lawyer. And you know what garbage the Federalist Society is. It's just radical, extreme right-wingism. It's just sickness is all the Federalist Society is. I mean, they're the people that brought us Amy Coathanger Barrett. What does he bring to the table? Nothing. Then you've got Brian Angst. Again, another attorney. At least this attorney specializes in land use. But his real qualification is he's a DeSantis loyalist. He's been appointed to boards before. He does DeSantis's bidding. That's his real qualification. He is the guy that finds DeSantis's judicial nominees for the state of Florida. The reason Florida has such screwed up courts. Man, I hope your coffee's as good as mine. My wife is so sweet. On show day, she always makes the good stuff. Then finally, we have Ron Perry. Ron Perry. Ron Perry. This guy, I mean, he just seems like the picture of manliness, doesn't he? I mean, this guy right here, I mean, this is the guy, right? I mean, he runs the Gathering USA. He's a pastor. He has no qualifications to be on this board other than he is a radical homophobe. This is the guy, and I'm not exaggerating in the slightest here. This is the guy that said tap water is the reason we have gay people. I'm not even kidding. He says, well, if you look back at our history, we didn't have gay people. That's a lie. But his thinking of it was that, from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s to today, we seem to have more gay people. And it's because, there's estrogen in our tap water because women take birth control and women shouldn't take birth control. Yeah, this guy, nuts, crazy, weird, freak. And he's sitting on the board of this district that has already about $1 billion in bonds. I mean, sure, why wouldn't you put this guy in a district that can float billions of dollars in bonds? I mean, why not, right? A guy that thinks tap water makes people gay. Folks, Republicans cannot govern. I cannot stress it enough. They have never been able to govern. Ever. They're weak. That's why people, we have nutballs like Ron Perry on the left. We do. We're not immune from it. But we shove them in a frickin' locker and lock the door because we have spine. Republicans are cowards. Ron DeSantis is a snowflake. I mean, he's trying to register people that write anything about him, put them on a registry, like trying to intimidate people because he can't handle people writing things about him. Every other governor in the country has people writing positive and negative things about him. They just do their job. Not Ron DeSantis, man. That snowflake is melting. He took a playbook right out of Putin's book. This is straight out of Russia, folks. This is straight out of Viktor Orban in Hungary. They both passed this legislation that you have to register if you want to write a story about the governor. I'm not even kidding, folks. Like I said, we must be militant. We must be aggressive in our defense of America, or we will lose it. We will lose it because all of this nonsense that government, that Ron DeSantis has been trying in Florida, other governors, the governor of Indiana, the governor of Missouri, they're all trying this stuff after he tries it. If it's popular with their base, they do it. And it will spread like a rash across our country. We have to be militant about this. Fortunately, and it's a particular point of pride for me because, DeSantis, I'm a political commentator, folks. I am. I look at the news, I absorb it, and I come and talk to you about it. That's what I do. And folks, I have been going after Ron DeSantis. I have been because I see how dangerous this man is. He can never, ever be in the White House. He is as weak as they come. I'm telling you, at the behest of the Manhattan Institute and hedge fund guys like Paul Singer, he is destroying Florida schools. He is weak. He can stand up to no one. And the worst of the worst will have their hands on the reins of power. So we have to be militant, folks. We have to be militant about this. It can't just be Disney's problem. As much as a lot of us don't like the stuff that Disney does, you can't let them be taken over by the government. You just can't. And that's and to wrap up with Disney, I just want to leave you with this. Everything Ron DeSantis has done means nothing to Disney. Nothing. They have done nothing to Disney. You know, you've got this idiot pastor and this radical Bridget Ziegler running around talking about they think Disney's too woke and they're going to do something about that. You know, their movies are just getting too woke, man. We've had a Black Mermaid, and that's just too much. What are you going to do about it? Disney Studios is in Burbank, California. What are you going to do about it? Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. This was idiocy that has passed the bonds from Reedy Creek Improvement District onto the shoulders of the people of Florida. Disney no longer has to be concerned with that because they don't have to worry about whether they're floating more bonds or not, or if they have the finances to pay them, because those bonds are now owned by the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District created by Ron DeSantis, and they are his problem. And he keeps saying, oh man, we're going to make Disney pay those. No, you're not. You know why? Because you may have appointed 3 lawyers to your board. Disney has a legion of lawyers, and they are the best in the business. And now, every time Ron DeSantis acts towards Disney, they don't maintain the roads. They don't maintain the water district. They fail to provide adequate emergency services. They try to jack taxes on them. Disney sues Florida, and they will win because this is so publicly documented as to why. Governor idiot Manhattan DeSantis has said publicly why he's attacking Disney, because in his personal opinion, they're too woke. Congratulations, Florida. And there was a private conversation between Bob Iger and DeSantis, and it went something like this. DeSantis said, I really don't appreciate you, coming out against me like that. And Bob Iger said, 1, I supported my people. 2, shut up. And 3, what the fuck are you going to do about it? And Ron DeSantis went home because there's nothing he can do about it. Because in the end, it all comes down to reality. And you know what the reality is? Disney has built almost no new rides in the last decade. Only a handful. The vast majority of their rides, It's a Small World. It's built in 1966. Yeah, it was built for the World Fair. They shipped it into Disney World. Dumbo was shipped out of California. It was built in 1955. Just ride after ride. The vast majority, the animatronics are, the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics that are all over Disney. Those were built in 1970, 1971, 1972. Disney can tear that park down in an instant and still make money. And still make money. If Florida gets to be a problem, they can open a park up in South Carolina, in Georgia, Alabama, Virginia. There are a lot of places that are just as warm as Florida down south. They would be incredibly happy to make a deal with Disney to have those jobs. And Disney's park, while maintained superbly, and you wouldn't know it by looking at most of it, is not new. They have made their money out of that park. Their investments have paid back 1,000-fold already. And they don't lose money if they just tear it all down, take everything they tear down, bury it, pour base on the top of it, build strip malls, office buildings, and they become a landlord. It means nothing to Disney. Ron DeSantis has nothing on Disney. In fact, it would probably do Disney a favor because they would sue the shit out of Florida and build a new park. They stuffed Ron DeSantis in a locker, folks. And he's still trying to do that tough guy shtick. But folks, again, why I've got a great amount of pride, because I've been going after DeSantis. And believe me, folks, as a political commentator, DeSantis is a loser. People don't really like talking about it as much as they do other subjects. They'd much rather talk about Marjorie, the elevator flatulator Green. There are a lot of people that draw a bigger audience for me. But I've gone after DeSantis, and I will continue to go after DeSantis. And it's working. His numbers have plummeted. He's down in the 20s, folks. And I'm talking among Republicans. He's down in the 20s. He was neck and neck with Trump. Not anymore. God, I love my job. All right, folks, we have hit the fun part of the evening. Is that Miss Lisa Bowman? My God, we have a wonderful person in the audience, Miss Lisa Bowman. I won't describe my relationship to her, but she is a business acquaintance. She is a wonderful human being, incredibly patient, and will sit and explain things to my dumb ass. She's got the patience of a saint. Anyway, it's time for our round table. It's time for our round table. Let's do it. Let's talk. I want to hear what you have to say. I will answer any question. And to prove that, I got a question the other day on Twitter. The answer is boxer briefs. Thank you. So, like we do every show, I go to you good people in chat and ask you to pump out any questions you have about any current event, anything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It could be something we discussed today on the show. If you want me to expand on it, it could be something that you've got on your mind. Throw it out there. I would love to hear about it. Betty Cantrell, I get that question every show. I'll go over it again real quickly. People didn't show up. They just didn't. We Democrats had piss poor turnout. We need to really look at the Democratic Party here in Texas and our voter outreach and our voter turnout machine. We really do. That bottom line is we didn't show up. If we show up, we win. There are more of us than there are them. They may be loud, they may be vocal, but there are more of us than there are them. And we just didn't show up. We need a compelling candidate. We need compelling candidates. We've got a little bit of inside baseball. While we've got a couple of great candidates from here and that are already in politics here looking to run against Ted Cruz in 24, we have Scott Kelly, brother of Senator Mark Kelly. Scott Kelly is an astronaut. He works here in Houston at NASA, and he is looking to retire from NASA and run against Ted Cruz, and I am wholeheartedly supporting him, even though he hasn't made any political moves yet, hasn't opened up a PAC or anything like that yet. He will. He will. All right. Rick, I appreciate you. One of the ways that we overcome There's two things that need to happen internally here in the state of Texas. The only way that you overcome gerrymandering is we have to, one, what I'm doing here. I point out, I hold Greg Abbott's feet to the fire, and I need you to tell people about what I'm doing here. I need you to take your own thoughts after you digest what I say, and you need to be talking to people. We need to get the movement, the momentum going on the side of us Democrats within ourselves, because like I said, we had a horrible turnout. Two, we need to take a look at our Democratic Party apparatus. We had some great candidates in the last election. I really went hard supporting a guy by the name of Michael Creedon. He is a Democrat. He is pro-environment. He worked in the oil industry. He was a former, he's still in he retired from the Army National Guard. And when he was active, he had a stellar resume. His military history was fantastic. The guy's just was a terrific candidate. We had candidates like him all over the state, and we just failed them. We failed those candidates because we as a party didn't get really the lifeblood flowing. Everybody jumped on the Beto train and loved what he was doing and the talking points that were coming out of, when he called that guy a motherfucker. Everybody loved all that. But locally, as a party and as a people, we failed. And we have to get militant. We have to become very proud Democrats. We need to start putting those bumpers to, yes, righties are shit. Yes, they will vandalize your car. But we need to put so many damn bumper stickers out there so that people see, because, the bandwagon effect is real. Advertisers have known this forever. You get a momentum going here in the state and we win. So please, by all means, bring people to this show. Take what you learn outside this show. Take what you learn inside this show. Digest it and talk about it. You folks are smart. People are like, well, we don't want to talk politics. Well, don't talk politics. Talk about what's going on with people. Make it personal. You can do this. You can do this. That's how we do it inside the state. Outside the state, we really have to become much more aggressive as a party. Get the hell off the high road. Fight these fights. Tell people the truth about people like Ron DeSantis and the crap he's pulling. Marjorie Trader Green and the truth about what they say down at the border. We need a very loud megaphone screaming and supporting our people. That was a great question, Rick. I really appreciate it. It's been a few days. It was 3 days ago I did the dishes. I scrubbed the pans, if that counts. But wholly doing the dishes myself, it's been 3 days. I told you I'll answer anything if you... This is a great point. We are fighting the corporate media in this. They really do have a bias towards Democrats. They will say the stupidest shit about us, and it doesn't even have to be remotely true. And they will do everything they can to take the wind out of our sails. Superdynamic 1000, absolutely. Here in the state of Texas, they are going after Gen Z. They are terrified. These young folks are not like anything else they've ever seen before, economically or politically. And they are terrified of them. And they've tried to float the idea of bills of raising the voting age, and they have eliminated polling places at colleges. Again, The answer for that is no matter what it takes, no matter what kind of burning, broken glass you have to crawl over, you have to vote. You have to vote. Did you catch Marjorie Trader Green saying the anti-Semitic remarks at CPAC? Thank you for being you, and I like the mug. Yeah, I did. And I can't just beat up Marjorie Trader Green all the time, or I'll bore the shit out of you folks. Because she literally gives me material every day. Every single day, I could say something stupid that she's doing, something horrible that she's doing. And I wish I could talk about her every day, but I would just bore I would turn into the Marjorie Trader Green show, and I won't do that. Sundog Fun. I want to talk about this particular comment because it's very, very relevant to what we're doing, and I disagree with it slightly. Democrats need to speak, act rural as well as the city. We were rural at one time. I agree. We need to not intentionally turn off rural voters, and we need to scale back. Beto shot himself the minute he was going to shot himself in the foot the minute he said he was going to take guns. The state of Texas, you can't do that. You can't do that. You just can't. You cannot say that. I've tried to tell people over and over and over again outside the state, you cannot say that here. Even though you don't have the votes to do it and you are not going to do it, it does not matter. You cannot say that in the state of Texas. So yeah, I agree with you. Don't intentionally offend people, but I don't think our efforts need to be in rural Texas because like everywhere else in the country, there are so few people out there. There's nothing but dirt out there and dirt doesn't vote. If we focused on our strongholds and getting our own vote out, just our own vote, we have enough to win. Anything else is just icing on the cake. All right. There are a lot of great comments out here today, guys. This is really fantastic. Jay Dice, thank you. That was amazing. Texas Paul, did you see Matt Gaetz use a Chinese propaganda paper as evidence questioning a witness of the committee? Yes. Yeah. And there's so much more to that than just that stupidity. I mean, yes, these little Jimmy Jordan's hearings, his committee has just blown up all over the Republicans, and I am here for it. And Matt Gaetz getting up there and asking someone, see, these witnesses know what the hell they're talking about. They know what the hell they're talking about. The Democratic witnesses, they know what they're talking about. So when they bring somebody up that's an expert on the subject matter, Matt Gaetz goes out there and tries to ask him a question. If you missed it, he tries to ask him a question that was framed out of, and he read a comment from a Beijing propaganda site. It was one of their fronts. It was one of their PSYOP, just like Russia has all of these sites. Your pawpaw comes and tells you something ridiculous and stupid. He probably got it from a Russian disinformation site calling themselves a news source. Same thing happens all the damn time. Matt Gaetz just read it out, gave the source, and the guy's like, you mean that operation that operates out of Beijing? And he said, no, I don't pay much attention to Chinese propaganda. But there's more to that, folks. There's more to that. You need to look at this. He has an entire staff, Matt Gaetz. And on top of that, the committee has a staff. The chair of the committee has an additional staff for that committee. And this is what they came up with. Folks, the Republicans are not filling our government. You're only as effective as your office when you go to Washington, D.C. They have taken these jobs. They've got Kyle Rittenhouse is working up on the Hill as a staffer for Freddie March. They're not hiring people to do the job for us because they're not a governing party. I appreciate you, Jada. I appreciate you. And it shows in their staff. It shows how they humiliate themselves. You have to know, folks, we are fighting for our country, and we have a party that is treating these staff jobs as nepotism opportunities. They're treating these staff jobs as opportunities to bring in culture warriors instead of people that actually know how to do the job and that can help them be a part of the legislature. That is, that's why I go nuts when there's both sidism. You will get this idiot that tries to seem smart, who will sit there and say things like, well, the parties are the same. And, because he wants to seem like this ultra outside, super secret, smart guy that knows this stuff and about why this party's bad and that's party bullshit. I guarantee you, Daniel Goldman has sharp people on his staff. I guarantee you name a Democratic politician, and I guarantee he has smart people. He has lawyers on his staff. He has, politicos that know the ins and outs of how bills make their way through the government. I mean, he has people on the ground that can go out and attack any subject and become an expert on it so that he can be an expert on it. Folks, if you can, I need you to hit the subscribe button. I get the numbers off of every show, and it shows that about 30, almost 40% of the folks that are watching, I'm so glad you're here, but hit the subscribe button. I spent years watching YouTube without hitting the subscribe button. I didn't know what it did, to be honest with you. And I didn't want to find out. I didn't want to waste the time. So let me give you the Cliff Notes on it. It does nothing to you. It does nothing to your YouTube account. It does nothing. All it does is tell YouTube that you like my show and like what I'm talking about. And if I have a new show, it'll call your attention to it. When you log on to YouTube, I'll be one of the little notifications you get. That's it. That's all it does. But it helps me immensely with the algorithm. It helps me get this message out to other people. Just like you found me, it helps other people find me. So please, hit the subscribe button and hit that like button so we can get this show out to as many people as possible. Shameless plug for myself, folks. Sorry. Scrolling. Man, so many great comments, folks. You are the best. You are the best. I mean, I always expect when I tell people, hey, ask questions, I expect, out there questions like the one lady that asked me about my underwear. But no, almost none of that. It's all great comments and questions. I'm having a hard time filtering through these. Let's do one more really good question. Sorry about the radio silence, folks. I'm just going through and reading a few of these comments. I am my own producer, and I'm just a control freak that way. Jeannie, outstanding question. Jeannie Rude Savage asks, why do you think people like Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ron Johnson are elected when they are clearly unintelligent and don't sponsor or support any bills that help their public, help their constituents? Politics, and this is why, and this is the exact reason that people like Ron DeSantis are politicizing schools and everything they can, because when it comes to politics, most people don't have the time to do what we're doing right here. They don't have the time to sit with me for an hour and a half and discuss what's going on and get real information. It falls down to, there's a couple talking points. You get these idiots out there that, and I'm going to call them idiots. I'm not just uninformed. I'm going to call them idiots that Lauren Boebert's fancied as of late going to this church out there in her district, and she preaches. I'm not kidding. There's a church that allows Lauren Boebert to preach. Google it. It's gobsmacking to see that filthy human being pretending to be pious. But anyways, the people in these districts, they don't pay attention. They don't follow what's going on in their government. And it comes down to just teams. I'm Dallas Cowboys and you're Philadelphia Eagles. Or, you know what I mean? It's just that simple. They just don't actually have a clue how bad their own party is and the lousy stuff they do. That's one. That's the decent people that are out there that aren't involved. On the other end of it, you have people, this country, I've said this over and over again. My dad did me a terrible disservice. He made me believe my country was something it isn't. He made me believe that racism was over. He made me believe that, we were a better people than we are. And what Trump did for us is he brought the cockroaches out of the woodwork. And there are a lot of people in this country that are just lousy, racist, bitter, shitty human beings. And they love the Republican Party because the Republican Party tells them they're wonderful. Your hate is great. You're right. Bryan Cranston, there's video going around. I'm sure most of you have seen it of Bryan Cranston when explaining why Make America Great Again is such a racist statement. When was it great for anybody that wasn't white? They used to take Chinese people, bring them in. They weren't technically slaves because they were going to pay them. And then when they'd finish a job, they would usher everybody into a tunnel and blow up the tunnel and kill them. This happened in our history. They didn't teach you that in school because we teach a Daughters of the Republic curriculum. Daughters of the Confederacy curriculum. So none of that stuff was ever taught to you in school, which is what they're deathly afraid of, is us finding out exactly what's really been going on. Not to feel bad, because I will take you back to Colonel Davis. When we address these things, we can celebrate just the goodness of it. We can celebrate people like Colonel Davis. It doesn't have to be somebody's got to pay for something that happened 150 years ago or 100 years ago or 50 years ago or last week. We fix it. But to sum up with your question, there's some really lousy people in this world. And B, most people aren't paying attention. That's why when you look at what's trending on Twitter, it just gobsmacks me that you'll have Ron DeSantis do something, because I'm paying attention. I'll see Ron DeSantis do something that is completely fascist, literally out of the fascist playbook of registering people that say anything about him. But what will be trending will be Gonzaga or March Madness or a movie or new Netflix special, because people just don't pay attention, folks. And that's why I say we must be more militant. We have to. Well, folks, it's been a fantastic show. You've had amazing comments. I've been reading through them, and they're just amazing comments and questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to them all, but if we did, we could keep this roundtable going for hours. I know it. You folks are fantastic. I appreciate you, all your comments. I just want to remind everybody that you can get to all my social media by going to www.realtexaspaul.com. And you can catch the show here just by going to www.realtexaspaul.com. There's also a place to donate if you'd like to help out. And I don't have anybody paying me to do this but you. And I appreciate every bit of it. It also has my merch link there if you'd like to get Texas Paul cup or a Texas Paul t-shirt. That helps. Also helps out Midas Touch Media. And again, nobody's paying them. We don't have corporate sugar daddies. We do this on our own. I can't thank you enough for being here. I enjoy having you here. Looking forward to next week. Y'all have a wonderful day. Old Texas Paul out.